Next up is our panel on leveraging AI for positive impact, inspiring stories and innovation. And I am going to kick this over to Erin Byrne, who is involved with corporate sustainability, social impact, and she is our moderator.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Good afternoon, everybody. As Joanne said, my name is Erin Byrne. I have been in the corporate sustainability and social impact space for a good couple of years now. I am currently an executive in residence at the Rutgers Institute for Corporate Social Innovation, as well as an adjunct professor at Rider University. And I had spent the bulk of my career actually in the pharmaceutical industry, where I had led this work for quite some time. So I am really honored to be with you today. And we are going to talk about the AI and how AI can be used for positive impact. Just following up on Chrissy's last session, she was just talking about how it can just make your life easier and how it can do so many good things. And I loved that because I think that bridges us so nicely into the discussion that we're going to have today on how it can really make so many positive impacts, aside from making your daily life easy, and in so many other ways that I think a lot of us wouldn't have even imagined. So with me today, we have Dan Gordon, Grant Storry, Dr. Kylie Meyer. And right now, what I would love to do is allow each one of you to introduce yourselves so that you can give a little bit about your background, what you're doing in AI, and then we can dig into the conversation. So why don't we start with Dan Gordon?
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Erin, and it's great to be here. I'm Dan Gordon. And I'm the principal of the Colleaga Impact Fund and Accelerator, and we build collaborative impact ventures and companies. And my daily job is to go and find those ventures, see what works, accelerate them, provide them with resources, and then help them move towards funding. So it's great to be here and talk about some of the amazing things that we're seeing in the social impact and artificial intelligence space.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And on my screen, Kylie is right next to Dan, so we'll move over to you.
Hi, my name is Kylie Meyer. I'm an assistant professor at Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing at Case Western Reserve University, and my job is to develop and test programs to better prepare family caregivers for this role. If you've ever been a caregiver, we know that there's a lot of information needs, and it's complex. You don't just get a diagnosis of dementia, pick up the 36-hour day book that many caregivers call your Bible, and everything, you're good to go. It's a very dynamic process. Needs evolve over time. Information needs evolve over time. And you don't want to give a poor caregiver a fire hose of information that could be overwhelming and just add to their stress. You probably see where this is going. I am interested in taking some of our traditional psychoeducational methods, such as group-based learning and facilitated discussion using workbooks, for example, and integrating AI so that these are a little bit more feasible for caregivers to participate in and a little less time burdensome, because we know that caregivers are very busy.
Fantastic. Can't wait to hear more. And Grant, we'll move over to you.
Sure, really quickly. Thanks, Erin. Pleasure to be here. I've been in technology for over 25 years in roles spanning product marketing, operations, and leadership and entrepreneurship. And the most relevant experience for me being on the panel is my involvement with Kieran AI, which is a knowledge-based first AI tool. And we're really at Kieran working towards AI for the rest of us and looking at how we can take this technology and allow experts and everyday folks with their knowledge of what they know to be true to be able to put that into the AI so that it tunes to them and can respond in a way that they can trust and accelerate their impact with.
Fantastic. A lot of the objectives that we have for this session are really talking about AI and how it has this great potential for positive change. But we also want to talk about these real world examples that you all have where you're using AI to actually implement and make things better currently. And then we'll get into maybe some of the challenges and opportunities as well as any FAQs that come from the audience. So why don't we just dive right in? And I would love for you basically to take your introduction and just take it a step further for us to talk a little bit about where you're seeing how you're using AI to just drive this really meaningful change and go in a little bit more detail into specifics and examples from your work. So Grant, you started a little bit. If we can stick with you maybe for right now, and then we'll move back to the other panelists.
Yeah, sounds good. So just to expand on what makes Kieran special, because it's a knowledge-based first AI, we're really focused on how we can support designing the technology, the AI technology, in right relationship with humanity. And so that question is central to everything we do. And we find that it really unlocks some interesting paths forward on how we think about designing the technology and what should be included in it. Obviously, I think it goes without saying that we live in an age with a lot of misinformation out there. And we really ascribe to the notion that if you put garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. And a lot of large language models and free tools, they're trained on just whatever the average common denominator of what's on the internet is. And we've found that there's a lot of scenarios where people really want a more curated experience with their AI, where they actually have visibility into the knowledge that's in it. And that's really what Kieran provides, where in its responses, it'll actually reference the knowledge base articles that have been curated by the very users that are using it to make sure that they can have the confidence that the AI isn't hallucinating, making things up, slurping in biased information or misinformation and that sort of thing. So that's the basis. And then with that, we're working with a variety of different launch partners on very unique AI assistants. For example, we're working with the Empowerment Institute. The Empowerment Institute was founded by a gentleman named David Gershon. He literally wrote the book on social change. He had a book that came out 2 years ago called Social Change 2.0. And we're actually taking all of the manuscript and expertise from that book and turning it into a social change coach that not-for-profit executive directors and folks in helping professions in the field can use to really be that coaching thought partner, helping them build their strategies and go forward. And we have a few other examples with Conscious Food Systems Alliance from the UN. They're taking their knowledge on farming systems and democratizing that to folks that otherwise might not get that knowledge. And the cool thing there is that the AI can actually help make really contextually relevant recommendations based on the local region that the farmers are in. So that's a really interesting use. And then we also have uses with meditation teachers that are putting their information into Kieran and creating highly tuned meditation experiences for personal healing. And then also working with some early childhood development psychologists that are taking their knowledge bases on interventions and getting them into Kieran so that they can be distributed to parents and school districts and that sort of thing. So those are some examples of how Kieran's being used for positive social change.
Yeah, I love the notion behind what you're doing, which is to get out the misinformation and the miscalculations, if you will, that happen in the ChatGPT world. Even yesterday, I was working with ChatGPT to get some type of basic calculation on an event that I'm planning. And I kept coming back and I was like, this is not right. And that was basic calculations, right? And that's just something so small, not totally dissing ChatGPT. It's helped me a lot, but just to bridge to what you're saying, that was a mere calculation for something I needed help with. But when you take this into fixing the problems of society, you need something that's really going to be top of the line and gold standard when it's coming into that.
I think that's such a good point, Erin. And I just want to highlight, that's kind of part of what we think about when we say about AI in relationship with humanity is it's so important for us as the human operators to not give up our agency and just assume that the AI is always right or is going to have the best answer. I think there's such an important review and curation aspect, and your example highlights that perfectly.
Yeah.
It's really important for us to just not assume that it's always right, but it is a great tool to accelerate what we want to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So Dan, if I could go over to you to talk about jumping from Grant's experience in the AI tool to how you're also helping companies through AI. I would love to get your perspective as well.
Thank you, Erin. I think I'd just like to step back a moment. There's so much hype and discussion about things like ChatGPT, that it was hiding the definition of what AI is about, which is much larger than that. So there may have been during the conference a definition of AI, but a working definition is it's when computers and machines are designed to think and to learn and to solve problems like a human. The large language models that we've been talking about are one kind of AI, generative AI, but there are other kinds like machine learning, which is the idea that computers can learn from a whole bunch of data and improve their performance without being directed at every task. And I think the way that AI is valuable in social impact for sure, but really in any setting, is to find those valuable and onerous tasks that humans do, and then train an artificial intelligence agent to do it faster or to do it better in some way. One example of that is mental health is a very poorly resourced area in North America and I would think worldwide. There just are not enough mental health professionals, and sometimes the professionals aren't in a place where people need to have mental health supports. The only way to get mental health support in those areas is through the phone. But there are also limited mental health telephone counselors. One company that we've invested in is Slingshot. And Slingshot is building a foundational model for healthcare and for mental health. And it's using its agent to scale access to telephone-based mental health counseling for millions of people. Similarly, Ellipsis Health is doing the same thing. They started off going to the same market, and they thought that the process they were looking at is people wanting counseling. Turned out that there wasn't a big enough market, and so they changed to counseling for people who have just been discharged from hospital. There are not enough counselors for those kinds of people. So now there's an agent that can help people understand what they need to do after they've been discharged. And the agent also has mental health supports within it, so it can detect things like depression. So that's one example of that we've been pretty interested in around AI being applied to really resourced areas of healthcare. Another example is in agriculture and specifically in soil improvement. So there's a lot of work being done in the regenerative space to improve agriculture, to reduce the amount of fertilizer use and to restore the soil. The key constraint to deciding whether a soil has actually been improved is the technical agricultural agent. It's got to go and it's got to go to the field and look at the soil and examine it and then test it and work out whether and verify that carbon has been sequestered or the soil has been improved. Agricultural agents going from one field to the next don't scale. So what Regrow and Colleaga have done is they are using AI to analyze satellite images and then correlate those satellite images with improvements in soil regeneration. And that's freed up millions of dollars from carbon markets for the farmers and the agents who are doing that work. And they train the models on existing satellite image banks correlated with soil sensor data. So those are just two examples of organizations that have found a process that they had been able to improve and used AI to do that.
Really remarkable. As we talked about, just almost the everyday person just thinks of ChatGPT, right? And how much deeper it is than just working with ChatGPT to fix these problems. So Dan, thank you for those examples. And I think we were almost on a healthcare topic a little bit right now. So very much appropriate to jump over to you, Kylie, because I know this is your bread and butter, being a nurse and solely looking at caregivers. So speak a little more about that, if you will.
Yes, absolutely. And I just want to make a quick clarification. I'm not a nurse. I love working with nurses, though. They let me into their club. I'm a gerontologist, but we are looking at family caregivers and supporting family caregivers. And one of the things that we know about caregivers is they're really busy. And so I mentioned before, we have these psychoeducational programs that we've actually been testing the evidence for the last few decades. And we're talking about an investment of anywhere from 12 to 20 hours if you sign up for these 6 to 12 week programs that a caregiver is supposed to sign up for, learn about skills for caregiving, which is great if you have the time to invest, but many caregivers don't. If you have a sudden acute healthcare event or your family member has a sudden acute healthcare event or a doctor's appointment they have to get to, that investment of time you would make into a traditional psychoeducational program, you're not going to make it. And that makes sense. That's understandable. We see this even more poignantly with Latino family caregivers who are the focus of one of our interventions where we're integrating AI And I want to go into this just a little bit more in depth because I think lately in our society where there's a little bit of caution about talking about differences and diversity. But here's an example of why it's important to recognize difference. And I swear this is coming back to AI. So among Latinos in the United States, we have this value of familiaism, which means that a lot of families are a little more reluctant to send their family member to a skilled nursing facility to bring in formal care services, which means the caregivers fall to them. So caregivers are busy. When we talk about Latino family caregivers, they're even busier. And we really found this out when we started testing a culturally tailored program to address financial well-being. And we focused on Latinos in this particular program because we knew that there was increased financial strain among Latino family caregivers in the United States. So if you look at Latino families in the U.S., they're spending about an average of 7% of your annual household income on out-of-pocket care costs. That's home modifications, out-of-pocket medication costs. So it's big, right? And so we focused on this population and we delivered this psychoeducational method of learning, and things turned out so differently than we had seen in other populations of caregivers in a non-Latino, not necessarily non-Latino, but a general group of caregivers, including Latinos and non-Latinos. Our caregivers, when we delivered this psychoeducational program, were less engaged. They were attending fewer sessions. And so we're scratching our heads going, what is going on here? And we realized that difference in terms of the level of care demands might be making a difference. So that's when I had the chance to meet with Dr. Chitra Dore, who is the founder of Amicus Brain Innovations. And we started talking about how could we use AI to enhance what we already had, to be this kind of supplement to traditional psychoeducation to better prepare caregivers for this role. And so we took our program and we added things like conversational AI that they had already developed, but we used as a secondary use. So if a caregiver, rather than me handing them a 60-page workbook and saying, okay, after class, go do the reading, you know how that turned out if anybody here is in higher education with your students. Not nobody, but fewer people do the reading than you would like, right? And so with our busy caregivers, they obviously didn't have time to flip through that workbook. And so if you could have a conversational AI that they could text, that would allow them to quickly get the information that they needed. And we talked about earlier how this information can be so overwhelming. If you just get discrete pieces of information rather than having this whole workbook chapter to go through, that could make it a little bit easier to get the information that you need in the moment. So I apologize. I only have very specific examples from caregiving. As I know Dr. Gordon and Grant, you have some great examples overall, but I only know my specific area.
No, I think that's wonderful. And one can only imagine and assume that what you're developing and what you're working on is being replicated in so many different disease areas. I used to work for 15 years in the diabetes field, and I can only imagine really what's going on there now, especially from that community level, right? From even the patient, the caregiver, but just community-based education and diabetes prevention area, I'm sure. Yes. And so, Kylie, just on that note, is it almost like a tool that's in their phones that they're just able to chat with, as if it's like an AI agent?
Yeah. And that's what we loved about the program. And again, this goes back to the cultural tailoring. We know among Latinos, we have a little bit higher smartphone use than necessarily having a desktop or laptop. So that made it an even better tool for us. And we had just seen some recent research showing the feasibility of text message-based interventions, particularly with Latino caregivers. So we thought, this is the perfect fit.
Yeah, that's perfect. Actually, probably about 10, 15 years ago, there was something called Text for Baby that was almost very similar, but I think at a very early stage of just that notion of caregiving and healthcare with a text-like medium or so. I'm going to jump right into kind of like our next discussion around challenges. So while I'm with you, Kylie, what challenges are you seeing in your work? And then we'll go to Dr. Gordon and Grant as well.
Oh, it's going perfectly. I'm teasing, of course. No, I'm learning in technology that we have a lot more iterative feasibility testing. So we are just finishing up our first round of testing this kind of integrated psychoeducation plus AI enhancement. And what we're realizing is that we made some assumptions here. So we said caregivers are busy. Let's have a short program. It's a 4-week program. People would be more likely to sign up for that. Great. Except we're learning people are a little slow to warm up to AI. So we might need a longer program so that by the time we're getting to week 3 of the program, we might have people who are AI curious now, but the program's almost done. So we're learning that we need to have more time. The other thing that we're learning is we need to find a way to incentivize people to get past the learning curve. So if you've always used Google to find information or called your local area agency on aging, learning how to change your response to go, oh, wait, I could ask AI this. That takes a little bit of training. And so you might think about gamification or using, as we are now, a tech champion or supporter.
Perfect. Yeah. I saw, Grant, you were shaking your head there. So do you have some similar thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of, it's funny. That was literally my first point. Was the biggest challenges are largely human that we've encountered, which is around people having legitimate trust and safety concerns with AI. And I think the first hurdle is ensuring that we're designing and developing AI and products in a responsible manner and can back that up and establish that trust, and that needs to be earned, which is totally fair. And then the second after that is the learning curve. And I've gone through that myself, even with being involved with AI companies, is just around like that eureka of, oh yeah, like that habit or that behavior of me going to Google. I can actually go and ask AI about that. Or when I'm sitting stuck, just wrestling with a problem, I'll just be in that mindset for a little while and be like, oh, I can actually use AI as a thought partner for this. And actually just reminding myself that it's that tool that I can use at any time. So I would say largely human are the challenges. And then the next one was something I touched on in the open, with just around data integrity concerns, which are also very valid. With Kieran, we're really focused on having knowledge first because of that garbage in, garbage out problem. And then also a lot of different apps are pretty opaque in the algorithms that they're using and the source data that the AI is using. And at least for Kieran, we want to make sure that we make that more transparent, so that humans can see how the AI has made sense of the knowledge that's in it, and also can curate it and edit it and build that confidence as well. So those are some of the challenges. And then some of the other ones, just from a broader perspective, that our customers see is experts, and Dan touched on this as well. They're generally bound by their time, with whether that's one-on-one coaching or teaching or training. And we think that AI really creates an opportunity from that challenge. We've also had, challenges of prior to AI around, you might have a really expert piece of content or book or manual or document, but it's in one language. And so I think AI being able to translate on the fly to well over 18 languages really opens up that knowledge that can really help people and maybe do, life-saving it, well, definitely life-saving in certain situations, and do that kind of automatically. And then also from an accessibility perspective as well, AI is really good, we've found, at helping with the challenge of restating maybe complex concepts. And I think previous panelists even mentioned it, I use this prompt all the time, but explain this really complicated concept to me as if I was 5, and just help me understand it and be my thought partner to walk through that. So those are some challenges that folks just generally have with knowledge. And I think AI does a great job of opening that up and demystifying that for folks.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And so Dan, we'll go to you.
I think that a number of those challenges speak to how the end consumer or the customer interacts with AI, and with knowing that your product is AI. But in many situations, the end consumer doesn't know, doesn't care. They just know that they're using an app of some kind. I think I'd like to speak to the barriers and the problems with AI from the developer's perspective, the product developer's perspective. And I think that at the moment, AI is, it's this amazingly sexy solution. It's in search of a problem. The key linked critical success factors for companies to succeed in building AI-enabled products is, as we alluded to earlier, number one, understanding, well, what's the business process that the AI is going to improve, and is there a customer going to pay for that? And secondly, what's the data we're going to use in order to train our AI to do what it needs to do? So I think that sort of really defines AI as it's not an end solution, it's a capability. And it's not the value proposition. It's just a set of functions that you use in order to do something that's valuable. So I think that for those entrepreneurs who are listening to this call, it's really important to focus on, for your customers, what the problem is that your customer experiences, what the values you can provide to that customer, and really understand what they need. We've been experimenting with Kieran. I love Kieran, and what I really like about it is it's reconceptualizing also the way that one can think about a problem. For example, I never thought that the problem with a book is that somebody has to read it, but that's not what a book is. A book is a whole bunch of information that you can reformat into a coach, and that becomes a different way of interacting with either the audience who read your book already or with a new audience who want a coach, like your Latino care providers who would never read a book about that stuff or wouldn't read one in English.
Yeah, these are really good perspectives too. And I appreciate you bringing up that perspective of working with your customer, with a business, with an organization who has that problem, who isn't an AI expert, but they know AI can help them reach their business goals or address the needs that are out there. And so really good perspectives by all of you. So thank you very much for that. And when we think about all of these challenges, there's, I think, a challenge that seems to seep in many conversations around AI, which is a little bit on that ethics and security notion. And I know that there was the session earlier today that talked about that, but I want to almost bring that topic into this conversation, because we talked about a lot of different things. We talked about healthcare workers. We talked about the caregivers. We've talked about health equity. We talked about food and farming and what it's doing to the nutrients in our food supply. A lot of different things. And so there is this ethical and security notion that is underlying in there, especially when you talk about smaller organizations or you're talking about different communities and diverse communities and trust within those. So how do we tackle that? Especially when we're trying so hard to make these positive impacts. And Kylie, I almost want to ask you, you talked about just the challenge of getting the caregivers to take that step in learning something new and thinking to ask AI, but do they trust it?
Yeah, absolutely. That is actually, okay, that's a survey question that we're going to have to ask. I think we haven't that directly. I haven't had any feedback so far that suggests that there are misgivings. I will say one of the things that we do and we thought about when we were designing our program was recognizing that there may be some queries that are appropriate for AI. And there's other things that you want to talk about with other caregivers. Having that integration of AI plus our traditional psychoeducation group-based learning that allows the caregiver to choose. That gives them a lot more agency to say, this is what I want to send to AI. Maybe it's something I don't want to share with anybody else. I don't want people to know that I'm trying to figure out how to manage credit card debt. That can be stigmatizing. But there might be some things that you bring to the group or bring to that professional facilitator that comes in where you might say, hey, has anybody else run into this problem? How do I get paid to be a family caregiver? How can I problem solve this? And so that's how we're managing that right now. But I appreciate the recommendation. Like I said, we're going to revise our survey.
Perfect. Report back to us. Grant, what are your thoughts, especially if somebody who's, and Dan, you can answer this too, right? You're working to build this technology with the good in mind, and how do you think about ethics and security in doing so?
Absolutely. It's such an important topic. And so I come back to what's the right relationship between AI and humanity. And I think about that all the time. And as we've touched on, I think it's really important for whoever's designing the technology, because technology is neither good nor bad, but it can be used for good or bad things. And also the other kind of caveat to that is it can be designed in a way that is detrimental. And so the company that's actually designing it, whether that's through algorithms or through the user experience or what have you, they do have influence on very imperceptible things that you would just as the end user maybe not even realize, but it's really important to think about those aspects of it. And so we do it, Kieran, a lot. I think backing up a little bit, I think the news of the week in AI is DeepSeek. And I think companies and teams that are focused on democratization of knowledge and of technology and potentially open sourcing it and decentralization are definitely interesting teams and services to keep your eye on, because I think inherent in those, you're not giving up your agency to a proprietary closed box. You're actually able to see the open source code, the algorithms, the thought that's gone into the AI. And I think that's really critical, especially in this day and age of misinformation. So I think that's very important. And also thinking about who actually owns this technology. There's an adage in technology that if it's free or very low cost, you as the user are likely the product. And like Dan mentioned, it isn't necessarily a product in and of itself. It's a capability, and that capability has been embedded in an existing company or an existing product suite. And you really need to think about what all does that company own or control? So if you're putting in really sensitive information into your discussions with AI, like health information or financial information, you might be getting really great value out of the responses. And also, if that company is Google or Meta, they also own an entire advertising business that they could may or may not be starting to cross-link with that information. So you just really need to go in with eyes wide open into what the AI itself is. It's a really powerful tool and a very enabling tool, but what are the relationships that you have with the company and that company's governance structure, capitalization structure, what have you, and just know what you're getting into. Yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I think about that often when I download any type of app, right? And what kind of information is it going to want to take from my phone? So it's a good way to think about AI for sure, because I think many of us just, are so attracted to how can it help me?
Yep. Exactly.
Dan, I would love to hear your perspectives.
Yeah, I would just continue on that vein. The AI brings up a whole host of ethical considerations. For example, the data centers running artificial intelligence next year will use more electricity than they'll be the top 5 countries in the world, if it was a country. This AI is like having Einstein in your pocket today, but it's more like you've got Einstein as your chauffeur and you drive a massive Hummer. It just consumes enormous amounts of electricity. Now, DeepSeek and that news may be that the energy consumption will be less, but it's a consideration. Certainly another consideration is every time you put a query into ChatGPT, you're adding your data into ChatGPT, and that's what makes its model better. You already were doing that because every time you put a query into Google knew what that query was, and that became the data that it used. It's not new, but it's expanded and amplified. The other one I would point out is I've been amazed and a bit horrified at what I've been able to find out about what should be private data. And so really being much more aware, particularly as developers, of what is okay or not okay to use when you are building products is going to be an important consideration. So I've just reconfirm what Grant said. Going eyes wide open and in the right relationship is a good way of thinking about being aware of some of these ethical considerations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good warning for an individual, but especially for organizations like your clients and Kylie, who might be using it too. Kylie, did you have a point that you wanted to add here?
Yeah, and I completely skipped over this when I'm thinking about, especially when you talk about financial well-being and caregivers, certainly, and people hear, AI plus researcher, wow, you're really exploiting that data. I promise I'm not. But one of the things we do with the technology that I think is important, and I was coached on this by Dr. DeRay while we were designing this program, is just reminding people, one, that they're interacting with the AI. When we're providing information about the tool, we do make it plain language, because if you read through a lot of user agreements, it doesn't make a lot of sense. What I loved about Amicus Brain Innovations is they had user agreement information that was simple, that our caregivers could understand. And the other thing is too, we coach our caregivers on what to use for AI. And we actually do collect some financial information, but caregivers know that. So we have a tracking activity where you track your spending on out-of-pocket cost of caregiving that goes into one piece of our platform, so that caregivers putting that information there, not sending it to the AI. So I think just having that extra level of guidance is really important too, as an ethical kind of protection.
Yeah, especially when you're trying to train these individuals on a new behavior as well. And it goes back to the transparency, I think, and the trust. Absolutely. I just want to put it out to the audience to make sure if you do have questions, please send them in the chat, and we will transition into the Q&A in just a moment. Trying to see if there's anything else we want to wrap up on before we do transition over to that Q&A. And I'm just scanning my notes here. But one question that did come in that I think is really relevant asks what measures should be in place to prevent misuse of AI in humanitarian efforts? I don't know if you've talked a lot about misuse. A lot of what we're all talking about is helping humans in society, but I'm assuming maybe this might be a little geared towards larger humanitarian crises. So I don't know if you have any thoughts.
And yeah, so sorry, it was like, and what safeguards can be put in place?
Yeah, it was what measures should be put in place to prevent misuse of AI in humanitarian efforts?
That's a very large question. And I think I would answer it where I would go to first is the context. What is the humanitarian effort? Because I think my answer would depend on the context on what you can do there. And yeah, for example, if there were groups involved that you knew for sure had a very certain sort of historical, structural, systemic oppression, making sure that the AI isn't trained on that and biased towards that and actually has other counter data set that would actually give a perspective on that. So that's just like one example, but it would really depend on the context and then just making sure that the AI that's being used in that context is tuned and structured in such a way that it would be able to help ease suffering versus perpetuate it.
Dan, this is Chaya. It's actually the question is from me. And I asked the question, especially we are working in different groups of some of the efforts for the sustainability development goals. And there are multiple groups and multiple perspectives from individuals. I think my question is geared more towards how do we ensure people have different opinions working in different groups, and how do you ensure that some of these humanitarian efforts are actually a lot more meaningful and towards the purpose, and it's not being misused or
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, great clarification. Thank you, Shaya. I think what jumps to mind for me is the information or the data that the AI is actually trained on. I think that there are vast opportunities to get underrepresented information and training sets for AI to actually enable diverse perspectives in the responses that the AI generates. I think largely the most popular models right now are trained largely on, North American and Western data sets, just because that's some of the largest publicly available data that the teams in North America had access to. And I think over time, I think it's so important to take some of these open source models that are now getting very competitive and then say, hey, how can we actually get training information, source information from underrepresented groups and actually work with those groups, not take the information, but actually collaborate in right relationship with them so they can curate and make sure that data is representative of what they would want it to be. And then start to look using some of those more localized models in those efforts would be a good place to start.
Thank you.
It's perfect. Actually, with your explanation there, you answered another question that had come in. So well done. Great. Okay. There's a lot coming in. So I'm just trying to keep up with what I'm seeing here. One did come in and it builds a little bit on what you touched on, Dr. Gordon, just about the environmental impacts of the power requirements, the water requirements, the emissions, the energy, and how do we balance that, right? This environmental concern, because here we are talking about positive impact, right? And so many of us are working in that sustainable with environmental sustainability as well as social impact. So where is the balance there? Do you have some thoughts in that regard?
Yeah, it's tough. It's been a discussion that I've been involved in at least a couple of times in the last few months. And there are those people who come from a perspective of saying, don't use it until the energy consumption gets better. There are those people that say, use it, but be aware of it, but be aware that the energy consumption is terrible. I don't know that I don't think it's an either or. It's not a sort of terminal or use it or don't use it. It's I think Grad's expression is the right one. It's be in right relationship and understand what you're doing and use the technology, experiment with it to see what it can do. And if it can solve a problem and if and when it does, then be aware of how to mitigate the energy consumption. Don't use it unnecessarily.
Yeah.
not necessary to look up the lasagna recipe on using ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Yep.
Google that one
I just-
instead. Yeah, Grant, go ahead.
Just to add to that, there are a few open source projects. I don't have it off the top of my head now, but they're starting to like meter and understand what does one prompt cost based on the model and the environmental footprint of the host company as well. And so I think, again, what Dan said, being aware of that, and then also starting to look for companies and models that are looking to differentiate on this, because I think this will be a good point of differentiation. And there's nothing stopping companies from creating data centers that are powered by renewable energy if they so chose. So I think looking at the whole tech stack that's involved in AI and saying, hey, how do we rethink the supply chain here to make sure that we are in right relationship with nature is critical. And then also what takes up the vast amount of the energy is training net new models. And so I think in general, as a society, I think we've come so far with the models that we have, and we haven't even started to incorporate the vast benefits that they could have into our societies. That might be a bit heretical from somebody in the AI space, but I think we should slam the brakes on, to be honest, and training these frontier models. And because there are other considerations, there's environmental, there's moral, there's ethical, there's a lot of things that I think our other spheres of humanity need to catch up with before the technology needs to raise to even greater heights with even greater technology or electricity consumption.
Do you think there's an opportunity that the models can help us figure it out?
I do, and I think that's the argument for AGI, but I also think that there's the concept of Jevons paradox in there, where we're always chasing efficiency, and then that's an endless loop, and it's a fool's errand. So I don't think we should wait for AGI to solve it for us. I think we have Project Drawdown. There's a lot of projects where people know exactly what we need to do to fix a lot of where we are today, and it's more the human will to do it versus needing something to be solved, whether that's by AGI or humanity. I think we have solutions. We just need the will to implement them.
I also think that the current zeitgeist, especially with what's happening in North America, doesn't lend itself to solving these problems readily. And there is a feeling of anti-regulation and keep drilling that will lend itself to, and the huge investments in data centers will lend itself to keep on going.
A heavy yes for me, in agreement with you on that. And so we talked about this a little bit too, about the impacts of do we foresee or concerned about impacts to marginalized populations and how the AI could actually exacerbate the inequalities when what we're, especially you, Kylie, are trying to do specifically is the opposite?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, of course, and this goes back to a lot of what Grant talked about earlier, is making sure that we've tested things really well, that we have trustworthy data. Our AI that we're using for our confidence program with Latino family caregivers addressing financial strain, that is really based on a very narrow amount of information, trusted government sources, a workbook, and then recognizing the limitations of AI, right? So especially when we're talking about somebody's individual financial well-being, the last thing we want to do is give somebody bad advice about financial well-being. That could be devastating, the opposite of what we wish to do. And so the AI has feedback loops where you could say, that's not the answer I'm looking for. You could bring it to another space, or the AI could encourage you to go to a particular source or say, hey, this is the limitation of what I can tell you. You need to talk to an elder law attorney. You need to talk to your financial advisor. So I think putting in those built-in fail-safes is important. And the other thing I don't know if we talked about so much is thinking about user voices, right? So I am a social scientist. I do a lot of qualitative research. I work with a caregiver advisory council, and I think making sure that you have that input, not just survey research, because sometimes that's biased by people only answer the questions that you ask. For example, I missed the trust question. That one's going in, but we can have qualitative answers to be able to receive information that we weren't expecting to find. So I think thinking about what social science tools might we have? Could we have user advisors a part of creating and refining our program as another way to offer some protections?
Yeah, it's almost like that community, listening to what the community needs, wants, right, before just going in with a huge solution, and working together. And I think An underlying red thread throughout this discussion today is really just about that integration and that balance, right? You've all brought it up a little bit about the balance between humanity and technology and machine, right? That there are limitations, and sometimes you do need to just pick up the phone, and whether it be an attorney or a medical professional or what have you, it's not meant to replace 100% those real life interactions and human brains as needed within that. So I think that's a really critical, like I said, underlying key here for this discussion. And so we might have time for maybe one more question. Hit some of the points on some of these. Here's one that I'm interested to see how you guys could answer this one, because it's about the education industry. So I might be able to chime in a little bit, but how do you see AI disrupting the education industry? Now, you're maybe not fully be in that industry, but I'll give you the floor to answer it. Nobody wants to start there.
You know what? I'm not in the industry, but I've done lots and lots of coaching. And what really qualifies me to answer this is I have children at university. It's crazy. Just ChatGPT is the way that I see that university students learn today. There has to be a fundamental difference. It's not about memorizing. The information is already. So what is the real point of schooling now?
I think it's a hard question. And I, for one, definitely cannot speak on behalf of any of the universities that I'm affiliated with, but I can just tell you as a professor in the classroom, I've seen it a challenge, and I am newer to the education industry. I spent nearly 2 decades in the pharmaceutical and healthcare industry before stepping into academia just a mere 3 years ago. So I've seen in the rise and the launch of ChatGPT, just the impact on some of the work of the students, and had to push back. And there's new clauses that are going into syllabuses, and I know universities are working on it in real time to embrace it in a way that can do exactly what we're all talking about. Help us, move us forward, let us be more productive, but not replace what students need and what we all need to actually learn appropriately.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kylie.
I just want to say the next panel is going to really deep dive into some of these questions as well. Yeah. Thank you.
That's perfect for the audience to stick around for that question. Yeah, go ahead.
I just add, and building on what Dan said, and I think, and again, my theme anyways, it's all about the relationship and what is the right relationship. And universities, I think, yes, they need to react and put in some clauses and that sort of thing, but ultimately, I think they need to evolve based on that reality, design educational systems with this new reality versus just try to stick to the rote memorization track and regurgitation, and then just try and make sure that AI is included in that. And I think a key thing for students is, how can AI augment my intelligence and be my thought partner? And how can I start to shift my relationship to the subject area and the domain that I'm learning about, where I don't need to be validated by being an expert in it, because the AI can do that. I'll lean into my humanity and figure out what are those relationships within that local context that really matter, that the AI can't see and doesn't have sensors for. And how can I really understand more of a systems thinking and a holistic thinking around that domain? And I think we need to train our youth around more systems thinking and holistic and heart-based thinking, and then use AI for the intellectual subject matter expertise to apply that to specific contexts. And I think that would be a very sweet evolution of education with AI.
I can very much appreciate that perspective, Gran, and it just makes me, I also have 3 children that are much younger, not in university yet, but one of the questions I always ask them, instead of what do you want to do when you grow up, it's what kind of impact do you want to have in the world, right? So if we can really work to shift our youth's mind to that holistic thinking and approaching their life and their perspectives in that regard, I think we can change a lot. So I know we were right on time, so we can wrap up with that, but I think that is a perfect way to bring us full circle here on this notion of just how do we use AI and make a positive change out there in the world. So I just want to thank Grant and Kylie and Dan for your time to have this conversation with me. I want to thank SheTek and Joanne and Chaya for having me as well, and all of you for your time. So Joanne, I'll hand it back over to you.